Let me tell you about a story. Now when men are talk bound about their law enforcement, a right bunch of clowns, how they wear their badge like a plastic crown, how they're sticking to a story of which they are now bound. It's a rabbit hole they don't want you to go down, but over in Wisconsin, they're doubling down.
Hello everybody, this is Eric Jose on Making a Murderer on YouTube. I cover the Stephen Avery and Brendan Dassey cases, but also as time passes I've been covering other cases such as the Staircase or OJ and many wrongful convictions of youth. I go over the documents, the photos, the videos, anything case related, so stay tuned because I have many more videos just like the one you're about to see. Hello there everybody, how you doing today? So, I had an idea about uploading this again, especially after talking to G-Man, Steve Moore, yesterday. I figured the dissenting judges came up in our conversation, mine and G-Man, Steve Moore's conversation, right? So, I figured maybe it's a good time to kind of revisit the dissenting opinions in the Banc decision. The dissenting decisions were quite, powerful. I mean, they weren't really holding anything back. They were, citing all the reasons why they feel that Brendan was coerced and how they feel that, habeas relief was designed exactly to prevent things like this happening to kids like Brendan, essentially, and to prevent injustices like it. And, they feel that the majority interpreted AEDPA in such a way as to create an injustice. I mean, they basically are just laying it right out there and not really, trying to sugarcoat it. And it's, I think it's brilliant, personally. So I'm going to show you a few things. You're going to see some of the things that Judge Wood wrote in her dissent. I'm going to show you one thing that she put in her dissent that was pretty brilliant, and it's basically a diagram of, like, the supposed fact that Brendan knew that's supposed to make his confession valid, and then, what happened previously, what happened before that, or where that information was available to Brendan before he said it, whether that be in the media before he was interrogated, or whether that be from the investigators that fed it to him. And she goes through kind of like an item by item list diagram. So I'm going to show you some of that, and then we're going to see some of Judge Rovner's dissent, where she talks about the statistics of wrongful convictions and coerced confessions, and makes her plea to her fellow, members in the judiciary across the country to really start to sit up and and pay attention to what DNA and the Innocence Projects and the work that they're doing to show that these wrongful convictions do happen, and that there are kind of some common seams that run through them, and because there tends to be common seams that run through them, that makes them, that makes it possible to help correct some of the problems. Because if there's common seams, then we can find out why that continues to happen in so many cases, as to create the wrong, a higher probability for wrongful convictions, and then we can address that situation. So that's what Judge Rovner is basically pushing in her dissent, that it's important that the judiciary starts to really pay attention to what the statistics are telling them, and they need to not ignore it. So it's very interesting. We're gonna go ahead and get into it now, and we'll see you at the end. Hello everybody. So how are we feeling today? Yeah, that sounds about right. But let's have a look at the dissenting opinions of Chief Judge Wood and Circuit Judge Rovner. The first dissent is going to be from Chief Judge Wood, and she really lets it be known exactly what she feels the majority kind of got wrong. She does it respectfully, but she's not sugarcoating it. She's just being very plain and very blunt about how she feels that this got miscarried, that this thing is just not, that she feels that something slipped through the fingers of the justice system here, essentially. So, but I think with Judge Wood, with her dissent, and with also Judge Rovner's dissent that's also there, two very strong dissents. I mean, they are very strong. I mean, and you're going to see. It's such a worldwide phenomenon. There's so many people paying attention. The case is so highly charged that it's hard for me to imagine that the Supreme Court is just going to like pass it by. Just doesn't seem very likely. So we're going to go ahead now and start moving into the dissent. Wood, Chief Judge, and Rovner and Williams, Circuit Judges, dissenting. Psychological coercion questions to which the police furnished the answers. And ghoulish games of 20 questions in which Brendan Dassey guessed over and over again before he landed on the correct story, the one that police wanted, led to the confession that furnished the only serious evidence supporting his murder conviction in the Wisconsin courts. Turning a blind eye to these glaring faults, the Banc majority has decided to deny Dassey's petition for a writ of habeas corpus. They justify this travesty of justice as something compelled by the Anti-Terrorism and Effective Death Penalty Act, the AEDPA. If the writ, as limited by AEDPA, were nothing more than a dead letter, perhaps they would be correct. But it is not. Instead, as the Supreme Court wrote in Harrington v. Richter, the writ of habeas corpus stands as a safeguard against imprisonment of those held in violation of the law. It is, the court went on to say, a guard against extreme malfunctions in the state criminal justice systems. Just as importantly, a closer examination of the supposedly reliable facts on which the majority relies shows that there are no such thing. Without reliable facts, there is no way to draw the Connor inference, to base a finding of voluntariness on the reliability of facts. Questionable though that link might be, this justifies a look at the reliability of Dassey's confession, even if, for present purposes, lack of reliability is not a standalone theory. A look at how some of the key facts emerged instills no faith in either their reliability or their knowledge and voluntary quality. For ease of reference, I have summarized in the following chart how the investigators extracted the critical details they were looking for from Dassey. It shows that there was nothing to ensure that Dassey was offering his own independent recollection. Instead, the officers used a combination of leading questions, coaching, and refusal to accept one of Dassey's guesses as the final answer until it matched what they wanted to hear. So this is the little kind of diagram she made up in her dissent. So here's the critical fact. Halbach was shot in the head. Why it is not critical. Dassey was fed this fact through a leading question after unsuccessful guessing. Why it was not critical. Dassey was fed this fact through a leading question. How it was fed, how it was coerced. With how the license plates were taken off the car. Who did that? On February 27th, the investigator also asked, did he tell you if he did anything with the license plates? So you can see she's pointing out that the investigators were feeding him all these critical points, before he could offer them on his own. So here we have critical fact that breaks up into three different parts here, sort of. So here we go. So the critical fact is Dassey sexually assaulted Halbach while she was handcuffed to the bed. So why it is not critical, number one, is the physical evidence does not corroborate this fact. Well, that seems about right. How it was coerced. There was no evidence of handcuffs chafing against the headboard. The handcuffs and leg irons found in Avery's room contained no fingerprints or DNA from Dassey or Halbach. Okay, why it is not critical. Number 2, the physical evidence found on Avery's bed is not probative. A plastic film. How it was coerced? A plastic film was found on the bed spindle, which spindle was polypropylene, which, according to the state's forensic scientists, is found in garments in addition to plastic containers and rope manufacturing. Why it is not critical. Number 3, this detail was drawn from popular media. Dassey testified that he concocted this detail from Kiss the Girls, a book he read where a woman is restrained during sexual assault. So that's true. I mean, Dassey did hold up under questioning. He took everything the prosecution had. He sat there and he calmly continued to answer all questions. And, yet still that doesn't get taken nearly as seriously as this train wreck of a coerced confession where these investigators are clearly preying on him. It is sad, and this is why Judge Wood is going to this extent to drive her point home. So the critical fact: Halbach was in the back of the RAV4. Why it is not critical? The media widely publicized that Halbach's blood was found in the back of the RAV4. How it was coerced? This fact was in news stories, right? If it's in the news, it's not secret. It's actually why they shouldn't have been telling him about. They should have been feeding him that she was shot in the head like they did, because that would have been something that would have been corroborative. That would have been something that would have given that would have given the confession validity. But they weren't interested in making sure it was done right. They just had their own agenda, I think, in my own opinion. But, I'll leave that for other people to decide on their own. So, critical fact. The RAV4's battery cables were disconnected. Why it is not critical. Dassey was fed the fact that Avery went under the RAV4 hood through a leading question after he unsuccessfully guessed. How it was coerced? Okay. What else did he do? He did something else. You need to tell us what he did. After that car is parked, it's extremely important. Before you guys leave that car. After Dassey responded that Avery left the gun in the car, that's not what I'm thinking about. He did something to the car. He took the plates and I believe he did something else to the car. I don't know. Okay. Did he go and look under at the engine? Did he raise the hood at all or anything like that? And so that's how we have the investigators leading Brendan to say things, leading Brendan to talk about going underneath the hood, leading them to the opportunity to collect a hood latch swab that then somehow ends up miraculously with nearly twofold nanograms of DNA on it. So then we get to critical fact. Halbach was shot in garage. Why it is not critical. In addition to being fed that she was shot, Dassey was fed that she was shot in the garage after initially denying she was ever in there. He also said that she was shot out by the fire first. That's the first place he said she was shot when they were trying to, get that out of him. So, anyways, how it was coerced. Was she ever in the garage? No. Investigators led him, saying, again, we know that something happened in the garage and in that car. We know that. You need to tell us about this so we know you're telling us the truth. Shortly after, they asked, tell us where she was shot. He says, in the head? No, I mean, where in the garage? After Dassey answered that she was shot in the truck and not on the garage floor. Come on now. Where was she shot? Be honest here. The truth. In the garage. So it just shows how they're basically guiding Brendan into saying what they want him to say. And, it's really ridiculous. So, here we go again. The critical fact. Halbach's camera and phone were burned in a barrel. Why it is not critical. Dassey was fed this fact through a leading question on February 27th. Then on March 1st, he guessed that these items were burned. So how it was coerced on February 27th. Did he tell you about her other possessions? She probably had her cell phone, a camera, and took pictures. After Dassey denied putting anything in the burn barrel or knowing whether she had a purse, cell phone, or camera, he was pressed about what happened and these items, and he guessed Avery burnt them. The only possessions he said he saw in the burn barrel were those fed to him, like a cell phone, camera, purse. Okay, so this is all very interesting. She's just basically saying how none of these critical facts, according to the majority, hold really any weight, because she's pointing out exactly how they were fed to him beforehand. Critical fact: Halbach's remains were burned in the bonfire pit. Why it is not critical. Fed fact and media reports. How it was coerced. On February 27th, investigators said, "I find it quite difficult to believe that if there was a body in that fire, Brendan, that you wouldn't have seen something like a hand or a foot or a head or hair or something. Media had reported her remains were found there." So that's how Brendan would know about that in the confession. So that's not really corroborative, really, in any way. And critical fact: Dassey resisted the suggestion that Halbach had a tattoo. This is about the control question, folks. Judge Wood is telling us about the control question here, right? Dassey's response seems to accept the suggestion that she had a tattoo. We know that Teresa had a tattoo on her stomach. Do you remember that? Shakes head no. Do you disagree with me when I say that? No, but I don't know where it was. So Judge Wood is telling you, like I've been telling you, and so at least somebody at the Seventh Circuit Court realizes there that is proof of Brendan buckling and acquiescing to investigators, not resisting. And she's putting that in as the final piece of her little diagram here today. So I am, just wanted to show all of you that. I just thought it's something special, especially for me, because the control question is something that really bugs me so much, as all of you know. How it was coerced. Tell us, and what else did you do? Come on, something with the head, Brendan. After Dassey guesses cutting hair, punching her, and cutting her throat. All right, I'm just going to come out and ask you, who shot her in the head? Critical fact: Dassey's jeans were stained with bleach. Why it is not critical? This evidence corroborates Dassey's trial testimony. How it was coerced? Dassey testified that his jeans became stained with bleach while he helped his uncle clean up what looked like an automotive fluid spill. Critical fact: the RAV4's license plates were removed. That's powerful stuff. She's basically trying to say that the whole spirit of what the writ of habeas corpus is for cases like this one, and that the majority is really dropping the ball. As the district court and the panel majority recognize, we have before us just such an extreme malfunction. Dassey at the relevant time was 16 years old and had an IQ in the low 80s. His confession was coerced, and thus it should not have been admitted into evidence. And even if we were to overlook the coercion, the confession is so riddled with input from the police that its use violates the due process. Dassey will spend the rest of his life in prison because of the injustice this court has decided to leave unredressed. I respectfully dissent. So, there you have it, where Judge Wood is basically saying it. This confession is just riddled with input from the police. The police officers or the investigators telling Brendan what they're looking for, and then basically letting him guess until he guesses right. But they're giving him the information beforehand because they know he's willing to please them. They know. They absolutely know. This trying to feign that they didn't know how easily suggestible that Brendan was. Yeah, whatever. I ain't buying it. I don't think many people are, to be perfectly honest. So we're gonna move into now where she talks about the basically whether or not the state courts really gave due deference to Brendan's age and suggestibility, and basically whether or not the special care that is required by the Supreme Court was actually applied here. So we're going to move into that now. To be sure, Harrington v. Richter holds generally that federal courts may not draw any dispositive conclusions from a state court's silence. But, by the same token, the state court's silence cannot be leveraged into any assurance that the court went the extra mile required by the U.S. Supreme Court and gave Dassey's age and limited mental ability particular care. The majority's finding to the contrary has no support in the record. Worse, the majority writes off, in a footnote, Dassey's extreme suggestibility by casting doubt on the applicability of a formal test, the Good-Johnson test. As the painstaking review of the record reflected in Judge Rovner's panel opinion reveals, even a layperson could see readily that Dassey yielded to any suggestion the person in authority made. More generally, no court is entitled to pick and choose which evidence to consider when evaluating the totality of circumstances. Clearly established Supreme Court law decisions compelled the Wisconsin court to pay special attention to Dassey's age and intellectual abilities, including his high level of suggestibility. Its failure to do so is one reason why it erroneously concluded that Dassey's confession was not coerced. It's absolutely right. I mean, the fact that the majority judges can look at that confession and say that it looks okay to them is really mind-boggling, to be perfectly honest. The kid is guessing the whole time. It's, painfully obvious. So, you see what Judge Wood was saying there that I thought was interesting. She's saying that, yes, the Supreme Court has told us that we can't necessarily assume that because a state court doesn't give a whole lot of mention to something as that, you can't take that as to say that they didn't give it consideration, or that they didn't give it the proper consideration just because they didn't go on about it, so to speak, in the opinion. But what Judge Wood is saying is that, but by the same token, because there isn't more about it in the opinion, we can't be sure that it was given that. So she's saying that that coin can flip either way, that because it wasn't talked about that much, we can't say whether it was or wasn't given proper, deference. And it's a fair point, because when you look at the totality of circumstances really around this, it really doesn't look like it was given the proper deference. It wasn't given the proper consideration. It appears. And so that's why when everything begins to add up, that laundry list that I was talking about earlier that the judge in the case had, noted, it's like, oh, thanks for making those notes, Judge. It seems like they didn't really matter to you, but you noted them. Thanks. It's just like, Jesus. Anyways, so I totally get what Judge Wood is saying here. And now we're gonna move into where basically Judge Wood starts just talking about all the red flags here and how she can't believe that her colleagues in the majority could just ignore these things. Nevertheless, first the state and now the Banc majority have culled a sentence here and there and have attempted to craft a coherent confession from them. The video recording of the police interrogation of Dassey, however, tells another story. One that is diametrically opposed to the state's tidy and selective summary. Among the many red flags are the following. Dassey's answers to questions frequently change at the detective's prodding. The officers laid a trail of crumbs, indeed, large signposts to the confession they sought. Whenever Dassey went off course, the investigators would shepherd him back into the desired direction at times with the use of fatherly assurances and gestures, and frequently by questioning his honesty. On both February 27th and March 1st, the detectives misleadingly conveyed to Dassey, whose ability to think abstractly was minimal, that his honesty would be the only thing that will set him free. Through subsequent questioning, it became clear that honesty meant what the investigators wanted to hear. Yep, 100% agree with Judge Wood there. Judge Wood's sharp. I really like her. I liked her in the oral arguments too. I just thought she was super sharp. Okay, so now we're going to move into Judge Wood basically stating the three principles here that the Wisconsin State Court failed really to give proper consideration. So we'll see those right now. The Wisconsin Court of Appeals failed reasonably to apply in any meaningful way at least three principles that the Supreme Court has clearly established. Number 1, special care for juvenile confessions. Number 2, consideration of the totality of circumstances. And, most importantly, number 3, prohibition of psychologically coercive tactics. This led to the kind of extreme malfunction in the adjudication of Dassey's case for which Section 2254 D1 provides a remedy. By turning a blind eye to these problems, the majority has essentially read habeas corpus relief out of the books. That's a pretty heavy statement she makes there. She's basically saying that the majority is basically writing habeas corpus relief out of the books with that decision. So strong words there from Judge Wood. And like I said, I think Judge Wood is right on it, man. She also had a thing in here that she included in the decision, and I'll leave the link to the decision below the video here, along with probably Paul Capaldi's video when he eventually makes it. But she ended up adding in this whole, like, it was like a diagram where she showed like all of the pertinent or most damning points that the state looks to, and then she made a column for why that statement was nullified or didn't have any real credibility, and then she has another column that cites the quote, or basically how that piece of information got discovered or what happened in that actual conversation. So it's interesting, and she creates it, and it takes up about probably 9 pages that she has this diagram. It's interesting, and so if you want, you should go check it out. It's around pages like 40 to 50 or something like that, I believe it was. So, but it was interesting, and she's thorough, very thorough. So now we're done with Judge Wood's dissent, and now we're going to move into Judge Rovner's dissent. And Judge Rovner's dissent is quite brilliant as well. It really centers around the whole thing that we live in the modern age, people. DNA is proving that people falsely confess a lot. 1 in 4 murder cases where there's a confession involves a false confession. 1 in 4, 25%, people. That's not a small number. That's not an insignificant, percentage. So Judge Rovner focuses here on what DNA in the criminal, what we're learning in the criminal justice system now, and how judges and courts are really being kind of thick, and slow to adopt and understand a lot of these social research into the Reed technique that's been going on, and what DNA testing has been beginning to prove to us. And she's just basically laying it out there saying, people, we need to come into the 21st century here. Why are we still acting like we're in the dark ages? Basically, paraphrasing. Oh, actually, before we move into Judge Rovner's dissent real quick, I want to show you a couple things. For those of you who are, maybe aren't on Twitter and stuff like that, I want to suggest some people on Twitter for you to create. If you don't have an account, create one and follow these particular people I'm going to show you right now. They are absolutely stellar. They are constantly posting stuff that are from the documents, from the investigation documents and stuff like that. Proof. Like whenever Ken Kratz comes out talking about some new lie or some new BS that he's trying to peddle, like recently with talking about the deceptive editing done by the filmmakers when he's the biggest deceiver of them all. You know what I mean? And you're going to find that these people I'm going to show you right now are the ones that are the very first to jump on him and point out all of his BS. And they are good at it. And not beyond that, a few of them just constantly, multiple posts a day, very smart stuff, very, very smart observations that they find when they're reading the documents. Just amazing stuff. These people, if you want to keep up with the case, but but this whole decision's got you down and you don't know, well, when you want to come check back in, you check in with these people I'm about to show you, because when you look at their Twitter feeds, you're going to know what's going on with this case right now. So I'm going to show you that right now before we move into Judge Rovner's dissent. So this is 6 people on Twitter that I really follow, quite often. The one that it's mousing over right there, that's TikTok Manitowoc. He's a Redditor. He is sharp. Man, the guy posts so many things that are just hugely, hugely thought-provoking. He's, in the documents. He posts a lot of documents, so if you want to get caught up on things, he's one place to go. 7 Pairs of Panties, another Redditor. Smart stuff. Tracy Coe, always posting about Brendan. She's a very huge supporter of Brendan. So I suggest when you want news about Brendan, she's a good place to go. Pub Tender there, TS. Whenever Ken Kratz comes out with some crap or some BS, you can count on her to be right there to shove it down his throat, to cram it back down his throat. She is a huge, huge, huge supporter and very smart. And then we got Foghaze up there, another Redditor, very smart. Very smart stuff. I mean, lots of digs into the documents and puts them out there for you to see. And another one there with Mystic Jinx. Absolute phenomenal supporter, phenomenal researcher. These people here, if you're following these 6 counts, you're gonna get a lot of information about the case in a short period of time. And by following these 6, you're going to discover others that are also very smart and very sharp. And you'll be able to get yourself caught up on the case at times when you need to. So, go check them out. Funny story about TikTok Manitowoc, everybody. that picture there, it was created by the SAIG Reddit community. They were making fun of him. They were trying to make fun of him. Well, because they don't like him. He posts, he says a lot of smart things and shoots a lot of holes in the prosecution's theory, and he puts up the proof to back it up, and they don't like him. They would like to silence him. In fact, they tried. They kicked him off of Reddit. He made one tiny mistake, and they kicked him off of Reddit. But they made that picture for him, and they made it as a way to embarrass him. And when they showed it to him, he liked it so much, and I agree, because I think it's hilarious. I think it's absolutely hilarious. But he liked it so much, he stole it from him and made it his profile picture on Twitter. Oh my lord, funny stuff, people. So that's TikTok Manitowoc. He's like I said, he's definitely one you want to follow. 7 Pairs of Panties, Exonerate, and Mystic Jinx. You're talking about some very hardcore Redditors. They always have the best information, I'm telling you. So those are accounts that you would want to follow on Twitter. They're going to get you some good information quick whenever you're looking to check in on the case and find out what's going on. Okay, so I'm showing you where to get it. Obviously, me too. I didn't leave mine there, but at the end of the video, I'll put you up my Twitter thing so that you guys can go and follow me if you haven't already. So I'll put that at the end of the video for you folks. Now, we're going to move into Judge Rovner's dissent. Like as I said before, Judge Rovner's all about saying, "Hey, look, we need the courts to come into the 21st century here. We need to start looking at what's going on around us. DNA is proving a lot of things, that false confessions are happening a lot more than we previously thought, and blah blah blah. Basically, we need to move into the modern age." So, and that's the main theme of hers, and I think it's a good one. I think it plays well, and I think it resonates. So here we go. Rovner, Circuit Judge, and Wood, Chief Judge, and Williams, Circuit Judge, dissenting. I continue to believe, as I explained in the panel opinion, and as Chief Judge Wood's dissent so persuasively argues, that the state court failed to fulfill the Supreme Court's mandate to review juvenile confessions with special care, and unreasonably held that Dassey's confession was voluntary. And for all of the reasons upon which Chief Judge Wood has expounded, and those set forth in the original panel opinion in Dassey versus Dittman, I too respectfully dissent. I write separately simply to point out the chasm between how courts have historically understood the nature of coercion and confessions, and what we know now about coercion and the advent of DNA profiling and current social science research. So she's basically saying right there that there is new data out there, new proof that our ideas about false confessions are outdated. We need to move into the modern era, and that's what the whole theme really of her opinion is. Unfortunately, 4 members of the 7-member Banc panel of this court do not agree, a decision that I believe has worked a profound injustice. Nevertheless, I hope to convince my colleagues throughout the courts that reform of our understanding of coercion is long overdue. When conducting a totality of circumstances review, most courts' evaluations of coercion still are based largely on outdated ideas about human psychology and rational decision-making. It is time to bring our understanding of coercion into the 21st century. And I think that there's a good chance that that's going to happen, people. Because, well, let me show you a few things that Jerry Buting said on Twitter. All right, so this came from Jerry Buting. There will be many amicus briefs. For those of you who don't remember, the amicus brief was filed by Wicklander, Zawalski, and stuff about how they used Brendan's interrogation as a what not to do. Anyway, more of those types of things will be filed with SCOTUS, supporting Stephen Drizzen and Nyrider in their efforts to get a Supreme Court review of this travesty on justice. I'll write one myself if necessary. Retweet this if it's time to end the illusion of justice in America. Then he goes on to say about Rovner. Rovner's dissent notes need for the court to update understanding of psychological coercion, since DNA proves innocence do confess. SCOTUS has not reevaluated police coercion since the advent of DNA and social science research on the Reid technique. Now is the time, and Brendan is the case. So, you can see that there's a case to be made. The Supreme Court really hasn't addressed this issue since the advent of the DNA testing and what it's showing us. And how many people, this disturbing number of 1 in 4 confessions in murder cases is a false one. That's a significant enough number to be disturbing. So we certainly need the Supreme Court to give these circuit courts something to work with here, especially with young kids like Brendan was, especially as suggestible in the learning disabilities that he had. I mean, all of these things, I keep hearing that totality of circumstances thing being spouted by those judges, and I just keep going, yeah, the totality of circumstances suggests that it's a farce. I mean, but yeah, I mean, the totality of circumstances, this all needs to be addressed. The Supreme Court needs to give a new decision to really give the courts of America somewhere to look for more recent information from the Supreme Court when it comes to for at least for juveniles. Hopefully, with Brendan's case, we can hopefully get something for juveniles, and that'll be a start. That will be a start. You know what I mean? So that's where we've got to be headed with this. But at least it's going to come down from the Supreme Court itself, and it's gonna be that's it. That's going to be it. And then the circuit courts and everybody else is going to have to kowtow and do as the Supreme Court wishes. And that ultimately it's unfortunate for Brendan that he has to sit in jail a little longer. It's a bummer, and it's a real kick in the teeth. But ultimately, in the end, because of Brendan, and because we all clearly saw what happened to him and we're not willing to just sit down and let it go and let it be, that Brendan is eventually going to hopefully have law in his name coming down from the Supreme Court to help protect future juveniles, especially ones like him in the position that he was in the future. And hopefully, after that, if we can get that to happen from the Supreme Court, hopefully in the coming years, the Supreme Court will choose to take on a few other cases where they can deal with how the courts evaluate false confessions and stuff like that with adults as well. Because like I said, 1 in 4 confessions in murder cases. That's a disturbing number. It's a highly disturbing number. So we're going to move into the rest of Rovner's opinion here, where she's basically, as I said before, telling, or stating in her opinion that the courts, all of her colleagues in all of the courts really do need to start getting on board and seeing the importance of this social research that's going on into the Reed technique and what DNA is teaching us. We need to pay attention. So here we go. Peer-reviewed studies confirm that jurors tend to have hard to dislodge beliefs that a suspect who is innocent could not be manipulated into confessing. And in fact, this false notion is precisely what the state implored the jurors in Dassey's trial to believe, arguing in closing that people who are innocent don't confess. We know, however, that this statement is unequivocally incorrect. Innocent people do in fact confess, and they do so with shocking regularity. As of June 7, 2016, the National Registry of Exonerations had collected data on 1,810 exonerations in the United States since 1989. That number, as of December 4, 2017, is 2,132. And that data includes 227 cases of innocent people who falsely confessed. This research indicates that false confessions, defined as in which indisputably innocent individuals confess to crimes they did not commit, occur in approximately 25% of homicide cases. Okay, 25% is 1 in 4. That's where you've been hearing me say that during this video. That's 1 in 4. That's a lot. That's a lot. That's a really disturbing percentage of people there that are innocent and confessing. What occurred here was the interrogation of an intellectually impaired juvenile. Dassey was subjected to myriad psychologically coercive techniques, but the state court did not review his interrogation with the special care required by the Supreme Court precedent. His confession was not voluntary and his conviction should not stand. And yet, an impaired teenager has been sentenced to life in prison. I view this as a profound miscarriage of justice. I respectfully dissent. And that's the end of, that's how Judge Rovner chose to leave it at the end of hers. And I gotta agree with her, to be perfectly honest. So there you go. That's me on Twitter, everybody. If you want to go follow me when you if you haven't created a Twitter account and you're considering it now that I've suggested it, there's me. That's how you can easily find me at irikose_on_MAM. So that's obviously, I post a lot of stuff about the case. I also post a lot about the Scott Davis case, which is not strictly related to making a murder of Brendan or Stephen, but I do post about it a fair amount. So that's where you can find me. And like I said, if you follow me and those other people I was talking to you about, you're going to find other people that post some pretty good stuff, like Scooby the Dog. There's a few of them. There's a few of them out there that are posting some really good stuff out there that I think a lot more people really do need to see. That they don't have, if they don't have the time to go in and read the documents, which are considerable. So it's understandable. So that's going to do it for the video here, folks. Judge Wood and Judge Rovner very handily, respectfully dissented with their colleagues in the majority there at the 7th Circuit. And honestly, I think that Judge Hamilton wrote, his decision there is, you can literally fill it with holes. And Judge Wood does. Judge Wood literally does, in her opinion, in her dissent. The diagram she creates, she just takes a Tommy gun and just, through the whole story that Hamilton, leads you through in his decision. So it's interesting stuff, but I think we're headed to the Supreme Court. I think that this case is really charged. It's got, by what I mean by that, when I mean it's charged, it means it's got a lot of people behind it. It's got a lot of people that are interested in it and what happens to it. There's a lot of people following it. So that in and of itself makes it something that gives the Supreme Court something to think about, because they know if they give a ruling on this, that it's going to resonate, that lots of people are going to be paying attention. And so the law that they create, or the law that they maintain, whichever happens, whatever they end up deciding, that lots of people are going to hear it, and therefore it's going to reach. It's not going to be like easily forgotten. And honestly, they know right now that this is a hot button issue. Interrogations and false confessions and wrongful convictions are all getting talked about a lot right now because of what DNA is proving. It's proving that the way that investigators deviate from the proper way of investigating creates these problems. And once a man is convicted, even if he is one of the lucky ones that manages to prove his innocence, it ends up being 10 to 15 years down the line, and it's so much of their life is now gone. And how do you even try to pay that back? All right, so that's about it for my review of the dissenting opinions of the Banc review. I thought it was something that kind of warranted look now that most people have watched MAM2 and are paying attention. So I figured that it was a good thing to kind of go over. And again, basically. So hopefully some of you found it enjoyable to see my studio when it was very first coming together there. You can see it's really a bare room still at that point. But anyway, so some of you may have gotten a kick out of that. But anyways, beyond that, the dissenting judges here laid down some pretty serious stuff, and as I've heard Professor Drizzen say many times, dissenting opinions can often turn around and turn into majority opinions later on as things change. Things change politically sometimes just the judiciary changes a little bit. Whatever it is, and then suddenly a dissenting opinion becomes a majority opinion. So that's what we're gonna hope is gonna eventually happen for Brendan here, when it's figured out how he's gonna get himself back in the game, and but it's for me a big deal to just keep his name talked about, keep him as a focus, something that Wisconsin can't just forget about easily. That people see what happened to him as an injustice, and it's not going away. That's, I think, a big part of what is necessary. So as much as everything Zellner's doing for Stephen as well. So anyways, that's about it for today, folks. If you haven't already, please hit subscribe, and we'll see ya.